For me, I really want to have better conversations about guns. Not that everybody is going to come to an agreement about the issue. I don't think we ever will. We're 320 million people living in a vast continental, nation. The idea that we would all agree on something is just preposterous. But I think the way we disagree, can be more civil. And that I encourage people to go out and be with people in real life and interact with people less on the social medias, which are really designed to drive us apart. The algorithms really are designed to do the opposite of what we need. So, go talk to your neighbor who you may disagree with, or join a club or something. And I think that I have a lot of hope for the future. I know that my views of firearms have changed a lot in my own lifetime, and I'm hoping that people can come to a better understanding of, again, why do guns make sense for those who own them? And then on the other side, for people who are gun owners to understand, why are some people uncomfortable with guns? Why do they associate firearms mostly with violence or other negative outcomes? That's part of their reality. And so, to try to understand why that makes sense to them. And then out of that, mutual understanding. That's my hope.
If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and consider, if you're able, to become a paid subscriber on defenders-live.com. Your support is the only way I'm able to continue doing this labor of love. And also, if you're looking for exceptional firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Lora Thorson, and tonight I am excited to bring to you Professor David Yamane. David Yamane is a sociology professor at Wake Forest University. He is an internationally recognized authority on guns in America and a calming voice in our divisive national argument on the issue. An Asian American and lifelong liberal from San Francisco Bay Area, Yamane became a first-time gun owner at the age of 42, and he began a 12-year journey into the complex world of firearms in America. Having one foot outside and one foot inside gun culture, it allows Yamane to speak with compassion across our paralyzing differences. His timely and original book, Gun Curious, A Liberal Professor's Surprising Journey Inside America's Gun Culture, was published by Exposit Books in June of 2024. I'm looking forward to having a great conversation with Professor Yamane. Let's welcome him onto the show. Hello, sir.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am just so honored that you would take the time. So the book has been out for a little bit, and I've noticed that you have been doing podcasts, giving presentations at various events. And haven't you already been on some of the mainstream media like Fox News, and were you on CNN as well?
Yeah, well, I've been on CNN in print.
Okay.
I was on John Avlon has a show that ran on CNN, so I was on that. Fox News. Most of the major media I've been able to have a few words on, but I do enjoy the long form conversations of being on podcasts as well.
It's fun, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I am curious about your experience there. Were there any, I guess, if negative press is the right way to say it, was there any negative pushback with what you did writing this book, or what was the journey there like?
Well, it's really been a roller coaster. And, I think that there wasn't necessarily pushback directly from what we would think of as the media. But I can tell you that, after spending 12 years, as you said, journeying through American gun culture and putting together a very strong book proposal, I also had an amazing literary agent. He was one of the top agents in New York City representing nonfiction authors, working for one of the biggest literary agencies. And he shopped the proposal for Gun Curious around to 33 different publishers, and we got 33 no responses.
Wow.
And so, the fact that the book got published at all was, a small miracle. So, that's not pushback from, CNN, but that is certainly some lack of interest on the part of mainstream publishers in New York City, which was very disheartening. I consider myself a pretty mainstream liberal, and I think I've told a fair and interesting story about gun culture, but there just wasn't any interest in a story that didn't talk, I think, really about, how either guns are destroying democracy or actually guns are saving democracy. Because I think if you write a hyperbolic, book from either perspective that the publishers are interested, if you write a book that tries to, sort of take a calm and measured approach and sort of try to find that middle ground, then there's a lot less interest.
Well, and also, I don't know that people are used to seeing someone like you, David, who is like you said, has one foot sort of on both sides of the issue. And I noticed when I was watching your channel last night how refreshing it was to hear you speak on this matter. And not only that, how articulate you are. Being a professor and you're having a lot of practice being a public speaker, it's just really fascinating to me. And I guess it might be wise for me to make sure that people understand and have a little bit of a background and foundation of who you are and how you got to this point before we move on. Because I want to just dig right in because I already know your backstory.
Yeah.
But let's unpack that a little bit for people who may not know who you are. I find it really fascinating, and I do have a follow-up question on that once you've talked about that.
Yeah, well, as you said, I have 1 foot inside gun culture, 1 foot outside, and that's because I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, in a small town, and it wasn't that nobody had firearms then. There were certainly people who were farmers and who were hunters, but certainly in my childhood, guns were not part of my reality. So I really wasn't anti-gun in any sense. I just was outside of any kind of gun culture, gun use. And as I moved on through my education, I went to UC Berkeley as an undergraduate, which is a pretty liberal institution. And I studied sociology, which is a pretty liberal discipline within a liberal institution. And then I became a professor, which is, a liberal profession within a liberal discipline, within a liberal institution. And, so I think that continued to insulate me from guns, for most of my adult life until I moved to North Carolina in 2005. And then over the next 5 years or so, guns just became more and more present to me, whether it was people I played tennis with who owned guns, people I knew who worked in IT or marketing or real estate agent. The woman I ended up marrying, she was very comfortable with guns. And so at some point, I kind of started to feel like I was the only person in North Carolina that didn't have a gun. That didn't lead me to kind of think like, oh, I should get guns. But it was really like, wow, the likelihood of me at some point encountering a gun is pretty high. I better know how they work, how to be able to determine whether they're loaded or not, how to make them unloaded, how to make them safe. And so my now wife, Sandy, hooked me up with a friend of hers from high school who was a firearms trainer for the Highway Patrol in North Carolina, took me to his farm and basically, had me shoot his 9mm SIG. And, I came away from that experience not sort of traumatized or with PTSD or anything, but I really had fun and I felt like it was challenging. So, from that point on, I sort of entered the process of becoming a gun owner. So, 42 years of my life, basically never saw, touched, or fired a gun. And then the last, 12, 13 years of my life have been pretty deeply involved in guns and gun culture, both personally as a gun owner and also professionally as someone who has tried to understand gun culture.
And you didn't go to the lesson with the idea that you were going to even like it, right? It was just I feel like I need to do this so that I know how to be safe around guns, right? Yeah. So you didn't expect to be converted, so to speak, right?
No, not at all. It was not my expectation. I now that I speak about this as a pivotal event in my journey. Yeah, I don't even have any photos of that day. It's not like, if I thought, oh, this is the start of something big, I'd say, wait, hold on, before I take the first shot, get the camera out, let's get a picture of me. Here's me loading a gun for the first time. It was literally, standing in this guy's backyard, shooting into a mound of dirt and, missing the target completely, no clear memories of that first shot other than missing because there's no real preparation for having an explosion out, an arm's distance from your face.
Right.
But, just the little adjustments he had me do to try to get closer and closer to the target. And, probably 2 magazines in, I was on, pretty accurate and then wanting to be more accurate. And, that old proverb within gun culture that there's no such thing as an anti-gun gun range certainly proved true, in my case, because I did come away from that, really wanting to know more about guns. We didn't drive from there to the gun store, but, I went.
You got curious.
I got curious. Yeah, it definitely sparked a curiosity in me.
Yeah. So that was a really good title that you picked, by the way, then.
Yeah, I feel like that, sociologists have a natural curiosity about how people are. I had a curiosity about guns, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who are
Yeah.
curious about guns. And I really wanted to try to attract people to say like, hey, regardless of whether you already love guns, whether you hate guns, whether you're uncertain, there's something in this book if you want to know more about it. And,
Yeah.
so that's where that
I
curiosity
appreciate that.
idea came in.
And you said that you learned that guns are normal and normal people use guns, right? Isn't that your line?
That is became a motto, and it was
Yeah.
actually came out of another podcast I did with a friend of mine. And he, this was probably 5 or 6 years into my work. And he said, what's one of the big takeaways that you have about guns or gun owners or gun culture based on your work? And I sort of thought about it for a second. And I said, well, I think it's that gun owners are people too, which you wouldn't really know if you only read the academic scholarship on guns and gun owners, because there's so much of focus on the deviant aspects, the criminological aspects, the, death, injury. And so, against that backdrop, my work was really saying had a very different starting point, which was, yeah, those are terrible things, like that people get murdered, people commit suicide, people are injured. Those are all really significant issues that need to be addressed. But if we're talking about 80 to 100 million gun owners and 400 million guns, plus or minus a few tens of millions, right? Most of those gun owners and guns are not going to be harmful to anybody, right?
Right.
And so that's the idea of the normality of guns and gun ownership, both today, but also historically.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue. And what something I found really fascinating about what you said, and I probably won't remember all the details, so you might need to help me out here, is on one of your presentations, you showed a graph of how the demographics are changing, which I found very interesting, but went along with what I'm seeing, right, in the gun world, not only from a demographic standpoint, but also you talked about the use of firearms now versus, or why they have them, I guess, which was hunting and recreation and target practice mostly. And now how you talked about the ads that were in, which it was a rifle magazine. Which one was it?
The American Rifleman I looked at, and then also Guns Magazine.
Okay. Yeah. And you showed this beautiful illustration. I'm a very visual learner, so I appreciated that. A beautiful illustration of the ads and how they've changed over the years, which is part of what you call gun culture 1.0 and gun culture 2.0. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah. So, shortly after I got interested in guns, one of the things I decided was, hey, I'm not just going to sort of have this as a personal interest, but I also, I think I want to do a research study of guns and gun culture. I was that fascinated by it. It's kind of because it was like, how did I avoid this for 40 years of my life? And all of a sudden you realize there's this huge world it's so diverse and so many people participate in it. And so I really wanted to do an academic study of it. But as I was learning more about guns in general, I was trying to find podcasts. And this is 2011, one of the biggest podcasts. I mean, Tom Gresham had his radio show, but Michael Bain had his podcast. And so I was listening to his podcast, and he was talking about sort of the future of guns and gun culture in America. And he used the term gun culture 2.0 to describe new gun owners, people who are involved in guns for self-defense, and non-traditional gun owners, and people involved in gun training. And it just totally resonated with me. And so I actually took that concept from Michael Bain, created a blog called Gun Culture 2.0, started using that term even in my scholarship. And when I actually met Michael Bain at the NRA meeting several years later, I kind of sheepishly said, hey, I'm David Yamane. I sort of stole your idea. And he was perfectly happy, and he was very gracious to have somebody, building on his work. But basically the idea is that guns have always been a very normal part of American life. Gun ownership has always been pretty diverse, that people have always owned guns for different reasons, including hunting and recreation, self-defense, family defense, community defense. But that, over time, the kind of center of gravity of gun culture has shifted, right? So different parts of the culture get more or less emphasis at different times. And, from about 1850 until the turn of the 21st century, that, recreational shooting and hunting, collecting were really the core of American gun culture. That's gun culture 1.0. But then starting in the 1960s, that defensive orientation, which has always been part of gun culture, really started moving to the fore. There's a lot of social unrest in the 60s, social uncertainty, rising crime rates. And so people got more interested in gun ownership for self-defense. Kind of roll into the 70s, you have the rise of the civilian gun training industry with Gunsight and Mossad Ayub and others start teaching courses that were previously mostly for law enforcement and military. The 1980s, of course, you have the concealed carry revolution, right? So gun culture really starts shifting profoundly towards self-defense. And in those charts that you talk about, by about 2010 plus or minus, the transformation or the shift from gun culture 1.0 to gun culture 2.0 is largely complete. So today, most people, if you ask them, what's the main reason you own guns? They'll say self-defense or family defense, personal protection, which isn't to say that people don't own guns for various reasons still. And I own guns for self-defense and also for fun.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are hunters and they have guns for self-defense. So, I don't want to overly simplify this concept of gun culture 2.0, but it really does capture that evolution of gun culture toward self-defense, which I think is the core of gun culture today.
Yeah, I agree. And I also appreciated the facts that you presented about the rise in female gun ownership, primarily in handguns in suburban and urban areas, and then also African-American and Hispanic rises in those. And I just found it all so fascinating to listen to you talk about all these things that I guess I could say I feel are true, just based on my interaction in my world and different places I go and people I talk to. And I think it's really cool. And I love that I'm a female in a world where female firearms owners and instructors are increasing. And I'm really happy to be a part of that. I really am.
I think, the gun, in the same way that gun culture has always had different emphases, I think that, there's always been diverse gun owners,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can find examples of, European visitors to the United States in the 19th century, kind of traveling around and being amazed at how good women were at shooting, rifles. And, there's a tradition of African-American gun ownership that is very deep. But sometimes, the most prominent face of gun ownership hasn't been the most diverse face. And so people oftentimes have this kind of Duck Dynasty sense of that's your average gun owner, right? But, I think that especially with the rise of gun culture 2.0, hunting, recreational shooting, those are sort of maybe more limited in the types of people it could interest, right? Like if you're living in an urban area, unless you can travel, it's hard to hunt. You may not be able to shoot recreationally. But gun culture 2.0, based in self-defense as it is, captures a real universal concern, right?
Right.
All of us at some level are concerned for our personal safety.
Right.
And some people will get a dog, some people will buy a security system, some people can afford to move into a gated community, and some people will look to firearms, right? And that's where we really see the profound diversification of gun owners in recent years, over the past 15, 20 years with the rise of gun culture 2.0, but also particularly in the last, 5 years with all of the, again, and much like the 1960s, right? A period of social uncertainty and social unrest and rising rates of crime. It's not surprising that a lot of people will turn to firearms as a means to protect themselves.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff to unpack here. And you speak to the idea of having one foot on each side, right? So you understand the perspective of the liberal side of things. And oftentimes that perspective is that violence isn't necessary, that we should prevent it at all costs. Okay. How did you get across that gap to sometimes it is necessary, and when it is necessary, it should be sometimes very violent, whatever it takes in order to defend yourself? Could you explain that journey for yourself?
Yeah, I puzzled through this a lot because, I think that without dismissing the fact that, there are 20% of liberals plus or minus own guns, right? So it's not like no liberals own guns. They're less likely than, moderates and conservatives to own guns. But, I trying to get at, what is the reticence among liberals about guns? And, in the process of kind of taking my journey and reflecting on this, I really came to see that it wasn't the guns per se, but it was really the violence that the guns represent.
Okay.
And you see this in the way that people talk about violence as always being a negative thing, right?
Yeah.
There's no sense in which violence can be a positive or a pro-social force among some people, right? And when I got into gun culture, and especially I started, being around the sort of defensive training community more, the way that they talk about violence as being pro-social, right, or necessary or a good thing, really shifted my understanding of violence per se. So, one of the 5 major conclusions I come away with from the book is that violence can be the answer, right? And this is, borrowing from Tim Larkin's book, right? Violence is almost never the answer, but when it is, it's the only answer, right?
Yes.
And so I think that's the kind of compromise I came to. I don't want to be violent.
Right.
If I've lived my entire life without having to use violence against another person, hopefully I die never having, used violence against another person. And, this is also what I think most people in gun culture think. There's a sense in which a lot of the critique around stand your ground laws, right, is, people just itching to shoot someone, just, go ahead, make my day, just give me a reason, to use my gun. But I think, most, gun owners are the exact opposite. They never want to have to use a firearm to defend themselves. But if they have to, there's really no other choice. This is whether it's, Masada, you've said in the gravest extreme, right? This is your only option at that point.
Hey guys, I want to offer you something that is a personal touch, something special that I can share with you to help you grow and develop along this journey in this path as a defender. And what I'm offering is a monthly live call that you can participate in. And we're going to be talking about the 4 areas that I believe all defenders of life should be strong in. And those are physical fitness, emotional fitness, spiritual fitness, and training. So if you're interested in learning about those things and developing yourself throughout that journey, I'm here to help you. And I want my paid subscribers to have that personal touch of getting to talk with me one-on-one in this group call and sharing with others and encouraging others along this path. So if you'd like to get in on those calls, go to defenders-live.com, become a paid subscriber. I cannot wait to see you there. And thank you so much for your support of Defenders Live. In that moment where that is your only option, if you've never considered that option or trained for that option, it's not on the menu for you at that point because you haven't prepared for that moment in any way, shape, or form. And that is, that's just a very sad, unfortunate circumstance. So, yeah.
And also, I talk in, I can't remember the chapter number right now. The final substantive chapter really talks about my journey through the defensive training community. And, a lot of that was really about having choices, that the gun gives you some choices, but also having a whole repertoire of other tools at your disposal gives you even more choices. Right. And, even going all the way back to, having some ways of negotiating uncertain situations without having to use any, tool or weapon to defend yourself, right? Avoidance and awareness. These are things that Michael Bain and many other people within the community preach. I know you've had Brian Hill on. Yeah. I learned so much from Brian and Shelley Hill and the Complete Combatant about having a diverse toolkit so that, again, the gun is your last option and it's not your only option. Yeah.
And all that decisional training, making good decisions in those kind of moments is really the pivotal, I think, a pivotal part of those kind of encounters so that it's not a knee-jerk reaction, that you can be under stress and still be able to think as clearly as possible anyway, or at least have trained and understand and I guess researched and explored for yourself what you're willing and not willing to do in those moments is really important as well, I think. Yeah. So,
and honestly, I have no idea, how I will actually respond if I ever am attacked. I just hope that, some of the things that I've learned will make me better prepared to respond, in a way that reflects being, ethically and sound, working within the law and, making good choices in that moment.
Yeah. Yep. I totally agree. I'm really curious. This is kind of a side question, but I'm curious because you talked about taking a class with Craig Douglas, the ECQC class. And I would just because I'm curious for my own personal interests, because I'd like to take one of those classes at some point. What was there anything that you learned in that class that you were surprised? Like, did you learn anything about yourself you were surprised at? Because I find that sometimes the most challenging classes that I go to don't teach me skills or techniques as much as they teach me about myself. So I'm just curious if you have any takeaways from that, and maybe explain a little bit about what that class is for those who don't understand what we're talking about.
No, I think, Craig Douglas teaches this course, ECQC, Extreme Close Quarters Combat. And it really combines some awareness and avoidance techniques, some ways of what he calls managing unknown contacts, so that you don't end up having to have a physical encounter with someone. But then, if you do, then you need to learn how to basically fight with that person, either on the ground or standing up, or potentially using a firearm at close range. And I think the easiest parts of those courses were, learning how to shoot from retention, or learning how to draw your gun from a seated position. And the hardest parts of that course was, the parts where you're actually physically grappling with another person. And you do this a lot, Greco-Roman wrestling, kind of standing up, and then some basically jujitsu on the ground.
Wow.
And, the realization that I had in the process of doing that was that I was really in no way physically capable of fighting with somebody. The first night, after basically doing a little bit of sparring, I went home and I was sitting in the bathtub telling my wife, I don't think I can even go to the class tomorrow because I was so sore.
Wow.
But I got up, went through the second, day of class, but sort of about towards the end, I was just so physically exhausted that I couldn't even really do some of the simulations that he has people engage in to kind of test what they've learned. And I actually had to sit out the last part of the class. And so that was, that failure to be able to even complete the course really made me realize, oh yeah, it's a great idea to think, oh, I don't want to go to the gun too quickly. If I can manage to defend myself without the gun, that's ideal. But if I'm physically unable to do that, what else can I do? And
right.
So, I think everybody probably fails that course in a certain way. To a certain extent, and by design, because he wants to push people. Like if he sees that you have more skills, or he'll just push you harder, right? Till he can identify your weakness, right?
Yeah.
He didn't have to push me very far to get to that place, and so that's what I came away from that class really understanding. Yeah, you have to have verbal skills. You have to have hand-to-hand skills. You have to be able to use your firearm in maybe ways that you wouldn't think of just standing on a square range. But of all those, it was the physical grappling part, and just having a level of physical fitness that would allow me to fight. That was my biggest deficit.
Yeah, not only that, but I think about sometimes, because I've added physical fitness into my routine on a regular basis. It's helped me so much in so many ways. But I often think about, if you're in the fight of your life, imagine the output that a person would have to go through in order to survive an experience like that. And I can imagine, even in the shape that I'm in, it wouldn't take very long for a person to just be utterly exhausted from the adrenaline dump and all of just the, everything going on in the moment. Like, it's like, take that class times 10 as far as intensity goes, right? If it's the fight of your life, because that was just training.
Right.
And I'm sure it was intense. I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
But
no, I mean, you kind of feel like, oh yeah, but if it really happened, I'd get some kind of superhuman strength or something like that. But I think it's more like, if you can't do it when it's not real, then you really are not going to be able to do it when it's real.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Huh. Well, that's really interesting that that's what you got from that. I've had classes like that too, where I'm just utterly exhausted at the end of the day. And oddly, I kind of find that exciting. Like, I like to, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but sometimes I portray having a lot of exertion in a class and learning really hard as being like such an exciting experience. and just at the end of the day, just collapsing into my bed and with a smile on my face. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
wow, I really put so much effort into that and I really gave it my all. And I learned so much in the process. And you could look at that as a failure because maybe you didn't accomplish what you wanted, but how much did you learn? A ton about yourself. And I find those kind of classes to be so fulfilling in that way. And it just gives me the fire to kind of come back and try it again at another time, or to learn from those things and improve myself however I can. So it's all good because it's all learning, right?
Right. And I
Yeah.
tell my students at the university at the start of every semester, think back over the course of your life and think about the most significant learning experiences you had. They tend not to come out of successes, right? They tend to come out of moments of failure.
Yeah.
And so, I had to sort of take my own advice coming out of ECQC, because if I just, if I go and I take a class and I shoot the qualification and I, get a good score, then I kind of pat myself on the back and say, yay. But, how much have I really learned relative to, something that, for months, I had to return to, that ECQC class and think about, what happened? Why did it happen? What could I have done differently? What do I need to do differently going forward?
Yeah.
And I still think about that as I, have those ups and downs in my fitness life. And, sometimes I'm more attuned to my health and well-being, and other times that falls by the wayside in favor of work. And then, I do sometimes think about like, wow, there was that time I was face down in the dirt with somebody on my back, and I basically had to quit because I felt like I was wearing this mask and I felt like I couldn't breathe. So I ripped the mask off, and that's definitely a moment in my life that I return to quite a lot.
Yeah, those are the kind of things though that you want to learn in training, David, right? You want to learn those things in training if you can.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to learn that on the job, so to speak, would you?
Right. Yeah. No, and that's why, I fortunate, enough to know Craig some. And so I was able to talk to him about that and to kind of debrief it over and over. And, he's like, this is the normal experience. And this is what it's designed to do, is to figure out what can you do and what can you not do. And,
right.
If he feels like if he doesn't show you what you can't do, then he hasn't really taught you anything.
I think that's great. Well, that just gives me more motivation to take that class now.
It's a great class,
Yeah. Well, let's see. I think I just want to finish up with one last question, and then I'd like to tell people, my dog's barking, then I'd like to tell people where they can find your book. I have to say, before we do this final question, I didn't know what to expect coming into this interview, but I have to say that the work that you're doing, I believe, is just so remarkably important to try to bridge the gap that is so often seen. And I find it honestly sad to see such a gap. And so I admire and respect the work that you're doing. And I thank you for writing the book. I think you're the right person to do it. So I thank you for doing it.
Oh, well, thank you. It's definitely, it can be challenging at times, but I have enough, I think, interactions that people recognize the importance of trying to speak across differences and trying to, respect the citizenship of people who disagree with us. And, I think trying to help my fellow liberals understand why guns make sense to people who own them. And, I think there's some people, to go back to the first thing we talked about, the kind of reluctance of some to want to hear the story. And I think that there are more people out there who are on the liberal side of things who are reluctant to hear the story. But, hopefully I can continue to reach those people and, to help build that bridge between gun owners and non-gun owners.
Mm-hmm. It's really important work. And I can only imagine how hard it might be sometimes. Well, I was going to finish off with why I'm curious, but I think you sort of just answered it. I was curious because I can't imagine how many interviews you've done, David, about this book, and how many hours of time you put into the book, and how many hours of time you spent promoting it. And we talked about your website earlier. And I just find it so interesting that you've taken on such a difficult subject in such an eloquent way to help bridge that gap. And my question was, why are you so mission driven to this? Why have you dedicated so much of your time to this? Why is this so important? And what drives you to keep going and doing this?
Yeah, well, I ask myself this same question sometimes. And, certainly there was a moment when I got that third rejection from a publisher. And I really thought, well, maybe the book isn't meant to be. And I think at that point, it would have been easy to walk away, except for the fact that I had invested, 12 years of my life in trying to understand the story that I tell in the book. And I really feel like that I still have moments speaking to people when the book finally came out, just hearing from ordinary people on the street who had seen the book or came to a book launch event or something and just expressed appreciation for taking a different approach to the issue, from not just screaming and lobbing bombs at the other side, but really, trying to approach the issue in a different kind of way. And actually, someone characterized me as taking a Bob Ross-like approach to the issue. And I took a lot of pride in that.
That's really good. I like that.
And, so I think that it's not the most popular way of doing things. I don't have 1 million followers on Instagram or YouTube. I'm, happy to take the few hundred that I can get. But I think it's a high quality few hundred, and it's people who really want to push the issue forward and not just defend their pre-established positions. So, feeling like I'm making a difference, I think is what, keeps me going. And I get enough of that feedback and appreciation for, trying to make a difference that it definitely keeps me going.
I love that. Well, I hope that you continue to get feedback. I find that really interesting because the mission that I'm on with this show feels oddly similar. There are times where it's really difficult and I think, why in the world am I doing this? But I just don't think that I couldn't do it. It just feels like what I'm supposed to do. And I think when there's that kind of mission and drive and heart behind it, it is nice and helpful to have people along the way to encourage and inspire and say, hey, really appreciate what you're doing. To hear that once in a while is nice, to reinforce that. But at the end of the day, it sounds like you have a mission bigger than yourself. And the work that you're doing is very much needed, especially this time, I believe. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, thank you. I when I started my YouTube channel, I had my blog did well, and then sort of blogging, I think.
And what is your YouTube channel for those listening?
The YouTube channel is, if you just go to lightoverheat.com, then you'll get redirected there. The title is Light Overheat on YouTube. Okay. But, I started that to continue to try to reach a broader audience as my blog readership sort of went down. And I was lucky enough to be able to consult with John Correa about starting a YouTube channel. And he knows a little thing or two about starting a YouTube channel. And I was always talking in terms of, viewers or subscribers. And he always kept me going back to, what are you doing the channel for, right? You can't do a channel to get subscribers, or the purpose of your channel or the goal of your channel can't be to get views, right? Yeah. You have to have a purpose for doing the channel, and whatever decisions you make along the way, how are you going to present yourself, what you're going to do, that all has to be, as you say, mission driven, right? Purpose driven. So I have, right above me on my wall to the left here, I have the motto is Light Overheat, and I have my mission statement, so that whenever I'm working at my computer here, if I, have moments where I'm like, what am I doing this for? Or, why didn't anybody watch that video? I can look up and I can say, okay, did it contribute to the mission? Yes, and so I think that was very fortunate for me to have that kind of great advice as I embarked on that aspect of the work I do. And it's, that applies beyond the YouTube channel too, everything that I do, whether it's writing, speaking, blogging, being on podcasts, it has to be for that purpose.
Yeah. I love that. So for everybody who is listening and not watching, because a lot of people just listen to the audio only version, they can go to guncurious.com to buy the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. You find out about the book and see whether you want to buy it. But if you do want to buy it, I have some links there.
Yes. And then lightoverheat.com to watch your videos and a link to your YouTube channel, correct?
That's right. Yeah, that redirects to my YouTube channel.
Okay, perfect. Is there anything, there's a lot that we didn't unpack. There's so much we could have covered. I did enjoy what we were able to cover, and I do think is helpful for the audience. You've been an absolute pleasure to have on the show. Is there anything you'd like to leave people with before we're done here tonight? Yeah,
everyone asks this question, so I would think I would be better prepared for it, but I was so caught up.
Everyone asks that question? Oh, well, then I'm going to quit doing it.
So I ask the question myself when I'm
Oh,
interviewing people. So it's not, I mean,
oh,
it's a good question to ask because they're, for some people, they have a clear idea of like, oh, I really wanted to say this.
yeah.
But, I think, for me, I really want to have better conversations about guns, not that everybody is going to come to an agreement about the issue. I don't think we
Mhm.
ever will. We're 320 million people living in a vast continental, nation. The idea that we would all agree on something is just preposterous. But
Yeah.
I think the way we disagree, can be more civil, and that I encourage people to go out and be with people in real life and interact with people less on the social medias, which are really designed to drive us apart.
Yeah.
The algorithms really are designed to do the opposite of what we need. So,
Mm,
go talk to your neighbor who you may disagree with, or
mm,
join a club or something. And I think that I have a lot of hope for the future. I know that my views of firearms have changed a lot in my own lifetime, and I'm hoping that people can come to a better understanding of, again, why do guns make sense for those who own them, and then on the other side, for people who are gun owners to understand, why are some people uncomfortable with guns? Why do they associate firearms mostly with violence or other negative outcomes? That's part of their reality, and so to try to understand why that makes sense to them, and then out of that, mutual understanding. That's my hope.
yeah. Very well said, and I'm glad that you addressed that. That was one of the questions I didn't get to, so I'm appreciative that you did bring that up. So, well, thank you so much. We're running out of time for this one, but again, a pleasure to have on, David. I appreciate your time so much. Keep going. Keep doing great work. I'm a huge fan. I'll do whatever I can to support your work. And thank you again for everything.
Well, thank you for the encouragement and for the preparation you put into this conversation. It was wonderful.
Oh, well, you're welcome.